Wszystko zaczęło się od króla Jagiełły. Mała Łodzia stała się miastem, które w XIX wieku rozwijało się najszybciej na świecie. W ciągu zaledwie 60 lat od powstania pierwszej manufaktury powstaje przemysłowa, wielonarodowościowa metropolia. Jednak wiatry historii nie zawsze jej sprzyjały. To, co zniszczył los, odbudowują łodzianie. Nasza Łódź. Miasto wielkich szans. Od 600 lat w sercu Polski i Europy.
Jesteśmy Polakami. Jesteśmy niezwykłym społeczeństwem. Zawsze w obliczu wielkiego wyzwania potrafimy się mobilizować. Potrafimy stawić czoła wielkim wyzwaniom. Bo nie potrafimy stać obojętnie. Bo obchodzi nas bezpieczeństwo i przyszłość naszych dzieci. Bo wierzymy, że nadzieja zwycięża apatię, lęk i strach. Bo mimo wszelkich przeciwności nigdy się nie poddajemy. Potrafimy ciężko pracować, wspierać się i działać razem. Bo zależy nam na naszej ojczyźnie, naszym osiedlu, naszej ulicy. Bo chcemy naszych niezbywalnych praw i wolności. Bo nie oddamy naszych marzeń. Nadchodzi punkt zwrotny.
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to our debate on the media education and its impact upon the society. And our panelists are Kinga Gajewska, a politician, a lawyer, and an MP. Grzegorz Stunża, media educator. He works at the University of Gdansk, and he is the author of the podcast about the future. Agata Łuczyńska, expert in education, co-founder and CEO of the Szkoła z Klasą Foundation, and Marcin Olender, manager for government relations and public policies for the region of Central and Eastern Europe. And my name is Joanna Łopat, and I will moderate this debate. Well, when I was preparing to this panel, I googled media education and I found a government website. Is it a trustful source? I will see what I can find there, and I will give you a definition that I found on this website, and it draws attention to a certain aspect of media education. This is the ability to use media knowledge and understanding, which allows the citizens to use media safety. The media literacy should equip citizens with critical thinking necessary to make assessments, analyze complex realities, and distinguish opinions from facts. Well, I think that critical thinking and the distinction between opinions and facts will be discussed, but I'd like to ask my guests to tell me what media education is to them. Let's start with the Member of Parliament. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must say honestly that I did the same as our moderator. I used Google browser to find out what media education is about, and really the first link was to the government website, but I used the second link, and I think that was the one by your foundation of media education. And number one, distinguishing between facts and false information, critical thinking, something that we don't have. We miss so much from the current school education, and I'm not saying that we lack it because teachers don't know how to teach our children, or that they don't want to do that. The problem with these additional competencies, which should lie at the foundations of our education, is the problem of too busy curriculum. If they have exam requirements, hundreds of things to be taught, because they will be assessed by the attainment of the children. So then it's very difficult to to give these soft competencies to pupils, to work on them. And I went more in depth on this website, and I looked at how or what kind of classes you suggest. There were scenarios for classes for as early as the kindergarten, very detailed scenarios, how we can convey this knowledge, use it with the official curriculum. Because that's something that teachers don't have time for. So to me, the solution to the problem and to give media education to pupils is to change the curriculum and to give more freedom to headmasters and to teachers, using, of course, these NGO scenarios. Well, if I might make a comment, well, there's this discussion what media education is about, how it differs from digital education and so on. This discussion has been going on for years, and the problem of the curriculum has been coming over and over again in this public discourse on media education. But I think that the problem lies completely in a different, it lies somewhere else, and it's very easy to enter into this loop by saying that we don't have time for that, so this is a problem. But I think that speaking about media education, we should start thinking about very fundamental competencies. Well, critical thinking. Very often when I go to school and I have such classes, I can see that pupils don't understand the text that they are reading. So this is the first aspect when we speak about media education. Reading comprehension, that's the first thing, and then the cultural context of what I am reading. Well, that's for in the context of children from Ukraine, and this is the first fundamental skill. Not only reading comprehension, but also reading a text to the very end, or to see a video content to the very end. So we are not coming any closer to critical thinking that featured in your question. And the second aspect, which is also crucial in my opinion, that we focus very much on, it's strangely enough, the understanding of my own emotions. Am I angry? Well, if I'm angry, how do I receive information that is reaching me? How it impacts me, what I do with it. And when we work at schools, this is what we focus on understanding ourselves in the digital world, but not only digital. And another aspect, understanding, and I've heard it today many times, how algorithms work, how I position myself vis-a-vis what reaches me, how my choices impact what reaches me, what comes to me, and how it impacts my functioning in the world. Well, speaking about media education, we should start speaking about social and civic skills and competence. Or the ability to be able to tell the truth from the false. Well, before we hear further answers, well, I will tell you why I asked this question. Well, I understood that it was quite banal, but I decided that it would be good to have this answer. Mathematics is obvious, biology is obvious. We've been discussing media education for several years or more. I don't really know what media education is about. I didn't want to listen a definition to hear a definition from you, but what it means to you from your experience. Well, I'd like to be a little bit provocative. I'm not sure whether history, mathematics are really obvious. We are reproduced according to a matrix, the Prussian education system, which changes, but it still goes on as it was invented. So we should ask questions like what history is. Do we need specific courses at schools, or maybe we should follow the project-oriented path? I've always heard my biology teacher saying about correlation between different courses. Well, that why don't we speak about chemistry at biology lessons and visa and the other way around? That doesn't work. So media education, do we need a new course in media education? We've been discussing it for years. No solution has been found. There was an interdisciplinary course. It was optional. It was, I think, media literacy or something, and then it disappeared. Nothing new replaced it. And I remember that 10 years ago or even more, together with the Modern Poland Foundation, we were working on a project for media education. I didn't look up for it because I'm afraid not much has changed. We are using technology more often. We have laptops for fourth year graders. We discussed it before this panel. This is something like a technology fetish. We used to have labs, sacred spaces for the headmaster and some other people. Then we had the multimedia boards, and now we have laptops. Although studies from Romania carried out 10 years ago or more showed that children who got access to this equipment, they first focused on entertainment. Well, in the smartphone age, maybe it's different. The question is whether these laptops will be useful to anyone or maybe only to those who know what to use them for. That's very difficult. But what media education is about, well, the national board understands media education in a narrow way. What if we critically assess messages that reach us? Well, in the context of public TV, we can speak of fake news. But if we don't say how this knowledge can be used to publish content, to use, well, we speak that media platforms are bad, but they give a opportunity for communication, so we can use it for social purposes, for what Agata has just mentioned.
Edukacja medialna.
In fact, should media education be fragmentary? The past several years, as a Polish Society for Media Education, so Alicja from Center for Civic Education, it's a model. We made a model of digital education. I wouldn't create boundaries, but how could we combine it with civic education, media education, information education, digital information? These are important things, and taking this opportunity, holding the mic, what you mentioned was decreasing curriculum, the amount of knowledge required by curriculum. It could be good and a right thing to do, but it's one of the many steps to be taken. just a few words speaking to what you mentioned, Grzegorz, speaking about those laptops for fourth graders. Very often we and want to solve difficult problems in an easy way. Laptops are like that. It's very easy to give someone a laptop and say, okay, we filled this technological gap, and now all children, especially those with from the poorest families, will have access to laptops. And unfortunately, this is the case in many places. In digital education, it's easier to tell people how to protect your accounts with difficult passwords. It's easy to do, but it's much more difficult to introduce those elements of media education that change attitudes that are based on relations and relationships. And one of the critical issues here, in addition to what I mentioned in the context of emotions, that is the pupil as a subject or as a person in relation to the teacher. Teachers often say you must not enter certain websites. I'll tell you how to use these tools. And the teacher doesn't know exactly how algorithms work. Who does? I don't. And this hierarchical message increases. How can the pupil work with teachers in a kind of as a partner? Now we have this space for our discussion that is a discussion about something that is not very well known, that may be a little uncertain. That is this critical thing is that we don't really know. We can stand vis-a-vis our students and tell them it's super difficult and we don't really know, we are not sure. And we can initiate a discussion based on an attempt to understand each other. Okay, Marcin? Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my own idea. In addition to what we can find on Google, we don't have any definition for myself as a citizen, as a parent. Media education is to produce well-informed citizens. Okay, say, okay, we solved the problem because we provided some equipment to someone. Okay, doesn't even touch the problem at all, because providing equipment is more about creating problems, especially in our country. Why fourth graders should be given this kind of equipment and not some other equipment? Why they? So to create well-informed citizens, of course, we know that algorithms are around us. We probably talk about content selection algorithms. Then we say kind of passé, thing of the past, because right now we have to do with generative algorithms, content creating algorithms, artificial intelligence. I don't understand algorithms myself. I'm only a lawyer. You can't demand too much of me. But citizens do not need to know exactly how algorithms work, but you need to understand generally how they function and how you should approach the results. And OpenAI, when it first appeared, okay, it was Bart. Look what Bart said. It didn't say anything. It wasn't aware of anything. What did Bart say? Okay, we shouldn't expect Bart or Google to give any truths, but I shouldn't perhaps give reveal such information, but certain official was really unhappy that a certain image was associated with a certain query, and they said, okay, Google, according to Google, this means something else. No, not really. It's only an algorithm that returns certain correlations in association with certain queries. Of course, I'm not a methodologist, although I'm starting to go through school with my children, and I'm already astonished by the curriculum. But the effect should be that we should have people who know how to consume and actively use technologies to participate, as Grzegorz said, actively participate via creation. There are a lot of opportunities. The problem is not the opportunity. What we need is rather motivation and opportunity, and I think we should inculcate this not while teaching children separate subjects, but we need to work with a certain set of values. We can do this while teaching children some other things, and we can show and point to certain issues and phenomena, and we need to work with young people as well as older people, because the level of our skills, shouldn't be restricted to children and youth. It's a continuous need, and the whole society needs to be educated. For example, this Gen I mentioned, it was released last year. Certainly the world has changed. Okay, I need to learn as well. I didn't know how to do this myself. These are some loose remarks. I'd like to ask you how media education looks like in Poland. You mentioned laptops, equipment for teaching rooms and curriculum. Now, especially in what Agata said, we are responsible, we face a challenge. We? What do you mean by we? Who is responsible for media education? Who carries the burden of carrying out this education? Oh, it's probably a question for me. Of course, it's not. It's obvious that the general education should be taken care of the Ministry of Education. So what we as politicians can do is to work with the experts, with practitioners, to create a curricula ensuring a space for this kind of education. Now, myself, I belong to the group which I think represents the biggest problem in the curriculum, obviously in addition to Minister Czarnek and the government. But putting in so much content and apparently unnecessary information, the teacher is restricted temporarily in terms of transferring knowledge. They do not have autonomy to create lessons, to keep up with the changing world. On the other hand, the students cannot develop their own interests or seek truth or check information whether something is true or false. It takes time. Another thing for directors, this curriculum is a problem. It's a problem for teachers who need to work on homework with their children rather than discuss what's true, what's false. I remember a confrontation with Professor Jakubowski of Evidence Institute, who is a certain authority for me, great knowledge, and I said, okay, let's reduce the curriculum. I published this kind of post on the internet, And a lot of people supported me, a lot of children, but the professor was offended by this idea, and he gave me some food for thought. It's a question for the panelists. If we reduce the basic knowledge, the foundations, won't we take this foundation from the children, some basic knowledge, to be able to tell between falsehood and truth? There's, flat earthers are becoming increasingly popular. Okay, especially that we are in a planetarium here. No. Now, today, even some obvious facts are doubted, such as the Earth orbits the Sun. Now, if we think about this Prussian system of education, should we think that the teacher should be an authority, or talk to children like a partner? Because a teacher is not necessarily in an identical position as the children. He or she perhaps cannot allow the children to say whatever they want. I wouldn't like it to sound in a Prussian way, but the teacher should be an authority. Of course, a teacher can learn how to use the internet or social media from children, but it's a teacher who should transfer knowledge and how to tell between truth and falsehood, how to check facts. And where they can find some reliable sources of information. It is an open question. Should we have more information at school, or only soft competence? I'd like to speak to what you say.
I faktycznie jest.
Well, because there is more and more information around us, and we are not sure whether it's false or not, or true or not, and we don't have tools to test it. Well, but coming back to the question, who is responsible? I think everyone has their own responsibility. Of course, the ministry is responsible. There are big high-tech companies that should finance long-term educational programs that will not be a single-off event, because we cannot think of any kind of training that would be provided only once and then everybody would know everything. Things evolve, technologies change. Well, we have our responsibility, each and every one of us. If we look at newsfeed with our children as parents, we give them permission to go online. The same happens to teachers. This is our responsibility. And I think that the only question that we can ask is what I can do, what can I do to properly use the media. This aspect of conscious use of the media at home, at school, in discussion with others. That's absolutely the key to me. Yeah, you wanted to add on that? Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, just go on. Well, the first thing, I'd like to come back to verifying facts, or it's very easy in most cases. We give this tool, we have a browser, and on many occasions I rage my private war because we all get in touch with rubbish in social media. And usually the first link tells us that this is a hoax or that this is fake news. So 30 seconds suffice to verify that, but people don't do that. So the technology is not a problem, maybe not even skills are the problem, because rather easy, although not everyone can use a browser. But the main problem is that people share such information or such news without thinking, especially if this is pejorative vis-a-vis your opponents, that you share it immediately. Well, you are very skeptical. I worked for TVN TV channel for 8 years, and verification is not easy. Well, in most cases it is. Well, for investigative journalists, of course, you need to double check it, but in most viral chains it is distributed, but the verification and stopping it is usually relatively simple and easy. Not always, but in most cases it is. That's one thing which is very important. Speaking of role models or roles, I will take on responsibility for that. Yes, everybody is responsible for that. I've understood, Agata, your postulate and proposal. We never know whether we don't go bankrupt next year, but we'll continue doing that. Of course, this is also the responsibility for offering specific products that promote certain attitudes and deter from adopting other attitudes. Well, you shouldn't be paternalistic. We had a panel in the morning on algorithms, how active platforms should be to promote something to people, thinking that this is good for them, and to what extent they should leave a leeway, a freedom to people. Like, for example, I read in Rzeczpospolita Daily a young author said that the flat earthers that they are on the rise, and he gave a title of the publication. So I used the same title, and I saw all they were rebooted. So yes, there is content, but this content says this is not true. So the person who wrote this article about media competence and media skills didn't even check it, didn't even spend time on doing it. Why? Because we are browsing through the internet. There are very strong signals telling us about the quality of information. Even if you look for flat earth, then you should first get video content telling you that this is not true. Should we remove video content about flat earth from the internet? That's another issue. We should have we should provide adequate tools and play our role in a responsible way, but maybe not too invasive. Well, today in the morning, one of the social platforms closed down the account of Mencen, the leader of Konfederacja political group. They have given it back. Well, at least they tried. But I see the role of the media. We have Demagogue portal, OKO.press portal. I myself, as a politician, preparing myself for different debates, I use, especially for controversial subjects, I use these websites. And for sure, something that encourages us to double check on facts is the fact that you can be sued, especially during the election campaign, where this legal route is much faster. So I think that this legal fast track, maybe flat earthers, this is a kind of slogan, something that you give as an example, but all of us know the contributions of politicians or experts who say that humans have no impact upon the environment or the climate. In the past, these people would be sort of pushed out of the mainstream or of the scene, but today they have 11% of supporters. Well, the discussion about responsibilities is important, and also the discussion about the freedom of speech. We could protect children, we could block certain content, use filters and algorithms to provide a very strong screening. But the question is, when can we ban someone from making a contribution? When can we decide that this link should be at the end of the list in a browser? That may be dangerous, because at some point the media platforms may start making these decisions by themselves without any supervision or control. And so what? There is a good example. We have the representatives of the parliament. I represent public university. We have media platforms, and we are all responsible for that. And probably you will not say it for yourselves, but before I discuss your cases, I'd like to say that currently media education in Poland at schools can be compared to the learning about how the engine is built, but you can't learn driving. You can learn reading registration plates, but that's it. So maybe we should provide some basic knowledge, some foundation, give some foundation, but we have a lot of materials from NGOs which work in these fields, and it would be lovely if you could go to schools and make these materials available. I studied the curricula for grades 1 to 3 at the primary school, because I teach students about media education. And I was surprised because this curriculum is quite okay. If a teacher is open-minded, they can usually be ready and make something interesting of it. Well, currently we are really witnessing a crisis of when it comes to the profession of a teacher, but I would opt for cooperation between different actors, but also for different communication at school, doing away with this hierarchical approach. We can plan our educational activities differently, and it's also and we also should be able to tell our our students, our pupils, that there is something that we don't know. I learned TikTok from my students. They told me why I shouldn't use it in the first place. But in education, we should have a goal. What kind of a person would we like to have at the end of the educational process, and how this person what they should do to adjust to what's going on around. I am for the freedom of speech, but some content should be forbidden, should be banned. For example, fascist ideology.
Rolę
You have mentioned TikTok, so I'd like to ask you about the role of social media and media education. Now, I asked you before who is responsible for media education. And when you talk about governmental institutions, the Ministry of Education, but in terms of social media, I'm not sure if it is possible, but from my conversations with young people, it shows that Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they are sources of information. No, Marcin. We mentioned all of social media except for ours, but somebody, I saw Richard that Google Class has 0 users, so our social media have not been successful. Okay. Now we'd probably have a lot of problems. Now we have one problem less. And I'd like to challenge you on one point. Maybe wrong because I'm not an expert. In my ideal world, such aces of internet would perhaps not done by school, but it would be obligatory. Now, Agatha said that about 500,000 people are trained, but still not enough. A lot of different organizations create great materials, but it would be great for each child to a greater extent be exposed to such materials, but you need to have a continuous education and repeated education. Myself, as a parent rather than an expert, I would expect this to become an element, not necessarily as a separate subject, but within the curriculum. Now, going back to the role of social media, it's a slippery slope. Now, media education cannot occur within a social medium, but it should teach us how to use social media, or rather how not to use. And when we talk about small children, they are not supposed to use them at all, or only under the supervision of children. You can create an account, a supervised account. If children are to get a device, we have a family link, and we can limit the time spent on a device, so that is a minimum that we can do. But once a child, say, breaks into the social media, we have age verification, but for a clever 14-year-old, it's no problem to get this kind of verification. So later, or sooner or later, this happens. So all kinds of platforms, not only social media, must be designed in order to not to expose children and other users to negative phenomena. That is normal. Everybody should be responsible for their services and make sure it's safe, well designed. Now we have GDPR, we have privacy by design, safety by design. This is kind of a baseline, but it doesn't answer to the basic question. If someone does not have the right competences, if he or she is not kind of prepared by parents and school, they will kind of have problems using social media. So social media are appropriate for media educated people who can use them properly. Now, I'd like to speak to the two of you. It's an important aspect. It's communication modeling and how we work, when we work with teachers. It's how they talk to students, and certain conversational culture. It's so important. I believe that we should go beyond the social media discourse, speaking only about the platforms and search engines. We should go back to basics. When we go to schools, very often we don't even get to the point of using the network, using the internet. We need to work with the basics, with the trifles, the ability to hear the communication from the other person. You don't need the internet for that. And social media is just another layer imposed on the basic competences. And I would like this discussion on media education to be about social education, emotional education, civic education. It's all linked. And that's what we are doing with Professor Pyżalski, who is present. We are preparing a program for community centers and therapeutic centers. It shows us how to work with excluded young people, and we had to stop this moment of working with internet. We had to work with making people aware of how my choices affect what I will hear, what I hear, what I understand from what I get, and going back to emotions. How does my emotional state make me vulnerable to information? Okay, the biggest lie is, okay, I get a certificate of resilience to misinformation. Okay, 10 points, that's it. No, because when, for example, when I'm angry or touched, it stops working. So I'd like this conversation about media education. Yes, I agree that on TikTok you can easily find an instruction video material how you can cut yourself so that your mother doesn't see it. Now it's a dramatic problem, but we need to make sure that media education is not only on a digital level. Yes, certainly. It was high time a long time ago, but we should stop talking about virtual reality. It is not virtual reality, it's a social reality. We live in a kind of extended reality, and maybe it's an issue for me if I find some time for that, but this basis for functioning in society, the focus on emotions, on the consequences of my actions. These are the bare necessities, and without it, we could as well go out in the street. Okay, we shouldn't go out in the street without certain preparation. We shouldn't drive a car if we can't do it usually. And it's very important what you said. What I'd like to add in terms of competences and civic society, what school can provide to create a civil society. We used to have civics at school. It's elements of civil society. Several years ago, this subject was changed into history and current times. And a new curriculum was introduced, very poorly prepared, and in September we saw the second edition of the handbook. That's a political responsibility for what we teach at schools. I remember participating in panels. One of the panelists was a lady from a digital center who investigated the pandemic and the teachers' competences during the pandemic. As we talked about teachers, I'd like to share the sad results. Many teachers just took sick leave, not because they were afraid of being infected by a coronavirus or because they were indeed sick, but because they were ashamed they were not able to use streaming platforms or Zoom and other things. So this dogma that the teacher should be an authority and that he or she cannot learn from children, it's something that is very destructive, and we saw that during the pandemic. And such teachers, the teachers should continue their own education learning, but take into account the low income, the low prestige of the occupation. It's very difficult to encourage 700,000 teachers to learn every day and to familiarize themselves with the wonderful scenarios prepared by the Media Foundation, because they just they can't be bothered to do so.
You referred to a very important aspect. So I will ask only one person to answer it. Is there any chance that this media education syllabus could fill in this generational gap? Because they decide, they have a decisive voice also in elections. So 3 billion should be spent on a different goal than the public TV channel. Well, in Poland we either support programs that address young people, but this year in Czechia we are launching a project that targets elder generations, and if it works out, if this program is successful, we will replicate it in other countries, hopefully. Well, do we have any questions?
Już? O, świetnie.
Alicja Pacewicz from the Civic Education Center and Mayday for Education. I'm very happy that I've heard so many wise words about media education. That media education is not just something that you do on the computer. Media is something that carries certain content, so you need to have a base, certain foundation without which it will not work. I would just like to comment on the answers about older generations. Well, my impression is that thanks to the pandemic, many teachers have learned how to use the media, how to use this is a gigantic or leap and increase in potential, and I'd like to refer something to what we do, but we need good teachers and good headmasters. for that. Pupils were inviting their grandparents to show them how to use browsers, how to find train timetable on the internet, or how to have an account of Facebook. I think that the previous panel was about bridges, intergenerational bridges. Of course, responsibility rests on all of us, but we need some systemic solutions that would open up schools not only to children, so that, but also to older people who could learn from children. We wouldn't like to have schools that close down at 3 p.m. This is my dream about an open school. Yes, the fact is that this message about media education is one way, because whenever we give this responsibility to other, then suddenly people become very critical. So it takes a lot of effort on the side of teachers, but we had examples of schools for disabled children where young when pupils were teaching their grandparents, they were showing also for schools for mentally disabled. They could teach them something where suddenly these when we share the responsibility with them, when we give them some of our responsibility, not on the face of it, but really, then they suddenly start thinking differently about it. We are trying to do it at our level, but it's really far from meeting the needs. When I'm listening to that, I'd like to be back at school at a good school. I'm not sure whether you know David, but to do reverse education, reversed classes. That is. The teacher teaches for 10 minutes or 15, and then they start discussing. But that calls for reverse education. Well, I'd like to ask you about one thing more, because what is important in media education is the quality of media, and media is created by journalists. Being a journalist, a journalist's job is not prestigious anymore, contrary to what the journalists think about themselves. This is not a prestigious job in the eyes of society, or a job where what you sacrifice then comes back to you in the form of high retirement or pension. So don't you think that we should encourage people to be journalists? We know that studying journalism means there are nice parties, but not many journalists studied journalism. Many good journalists studied journalism. Well, we have media workers, and the best journalists that I knew, they have already left the profession. And media are in trouble right now. Well, I do agree this is a similar problem as the one that we have with teachers. I fully agree. Janusz Mas from the Łódź Center for Teaching Excellence. I'd like to tell you that media education cannot be an addition to the education process. It must be at the heart of this process, but for it to properly resonate like civic education and other types of education, we need to do whatever we can to change this, or to lose this straitjacket of school where we have classes, grades. We should go for projects and then we could have a revolution, a real evolution in education, where a teacher becomes an architect of knowledge that is created by those who learn there. And this is a way to approach media education not as an additional element, but as a process which is there, which is at the heart of the educational process, called by tutors, teachers who assist pupils in the creation of knowledge. So this role is very important, and we learn from children. For many years I've been conducting academy for creators, and these young creators, they offer trainings and classes to their teachers, and I think this is a real educational value. Yeah. I see space in each subject for media education to be there. I wouldn't opt for a separate subject or a separate course, but I think it should go in the mainstream of each and every subject. Well, I can see a lot of potential in teachers and also in pupils to mutually share knowledge. Well, I'm afraid we should be coming to a close. The time has passed, so we need panels that will go on for 2 hours. Well, I think that this is a very important discussion, because I'm quite pessimistic about what we have achieved so far in this field of education, because when we see how young people are going to vote in the context of the coming elections, well, this is really horrifying. So I think that we'll be coming back to the problem of media education. Thank you very much for this exchange of views. Thank you. And thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Każdy wybór ma swoje konsekwencje.
Dziś na kazaniu o takich jak ty mówili, że to morderczynie.
A wiesz, że ta, która ci pomogła, trafi za kraty?
Trzeba mieć sumienie.
Jak mogłaś to zrobić własnej matce?
Aborcja to najgorsza zbrodnia.
Gdybym ja podjęła taką decyzję, nie byłoby cię tutaj.
Organy państwa nie będą przyglądać się temu obojętnie.
Życie i zdrowie kobiety jest najważniejsze.
Stop kryminalizacji aborcji.
Kobieta decyduje.
Jestem z zawodu lekarzem, zajmowała się diagnostyką chorób nowotworowych.
W Białorusi zajmowałam się mikrobiologią i molekularną biologią.
Byłem nauczycielem szkoły podstawowej.
Naszym celem jest budowanie umiejętności, które są ważne na polskim rynku pracy.
Szybko nabierają takiej pewności siebie, bardzo szybko się uczą.
Wszystko możliwe, kiedy starasz się.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihrer Ausreise.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Pan Zbigniew Hołdys.
Zgadza się. Dla znajomych Zbyszek.
Serio? Zbyszek. Nadchodzące wybory są zbyt ważne, żeby zostawić je bez kontroli. Dołącz do obywatelskiej kontroli wyborów. Zróbmy wybory bez picu.